Odell Beckham Jr. recently said that $100 million doesn't last forever after tax.
Can you make that last forever? And you always hear the people who ain't been in the position like, oh, well, that would last a lifetime.
Of course, this is absurdly out of touch, and he's getting rightfully clowned for it. I understand why so many fans don't like him.
You gonna wait 40 minutes, and I'm gonna be on a private plane home. Good. Yeah, too fat ass.
With that being said, I've seen far too many people criticize his ability because they don't like his personality. One catch merchant, overrated.
Soft, overrated, pretty boy, a bitch.
We've collectively forgotten just how incredible Odell Beckham Jr. was in his prime. This video is about this Odell. The Odell who was a top 3 receiver in the NFL. The Odell who was the single biggest draw in football. The Odell who earned enough grace on the field to be that Odell off the field. But before he made it to the league, Beckham was already a hometown hero. Born in Baton Rouge and raised in NOLA, he lettered in football, basketball, and track and field. He was a standout long jumper and sprinter, but obviously, football was his best sport. He chose LSU, where he shared a receiver room with future NFL teammates Ruben Randall, Russell Shepard, and Jarvis Landry. The Tigers made it to the BCS championship his freshman year, but fell short of the national title. Despite mediocre QB play throughout most of his college career, Beckham emerged into an elite draft prospect his junior year. Clean route running, elite instincts as a ball carrier, and of course, some of the surest hands in college football. Who else has a touchback as a highlight? He went for 1,200 scrimmage yards and 8 touchdowns that season. Beckham ran an official 4.43 at the combine, but his game speed played even faster than that. He made defenders look slow when he got into space. For all of those reasons, the Giants picked him 12th overall in the loaded 2014 draft. Welcome to New York. Beckham's first few months with the Giants were tumultuous. He missed his first minicamp with a strained hamstring. Then, on the first day of training camp, he pulled that hamstring again. He went on to re-aggravate the hammy for a third time before what was set to be his first preseason game in mid-August. Giants fans hardly saw this guy at all before his regular season debut. He was a rookie with no minicamp, no training camp, no game reps, and very limited practice. Even then, in just 12 games, Odell Beckham Jr. had the greatest rookie receiving season in NFL history. He went for 44 yards in his first touchdown in his debut in Week 5, hitting the whip as his signature touchdown celebration. You're welcome, Salento. Beckham scored 2 touchdowns in his first matchup against the Cowboys in Week 7. He already had 3 touchdowns in his first 3 weeks, but he was just getting started. Across the final 9 games of his rookie season, he went for 1,199 receiving yards and 9 touchdowns without a single game under 90 yards. Only 2012 Megatron has more receiving yards in a single season 9-game span. Extrapolating that 9-game pace over a full 17-game season, Beckham was tracking for 2,265 receiving yards. His 593 yards in the month of November are still the most ever in a single calendar month. It felt like he got open on every play, and even when he was covered, he went up and made the contested catch. At 5'11", he was rising up over DBs down the sideline, catching slants and drags underneath, and running end arounds for first downs. He literally did it all at an elite level as a rookie who missed his entire preseason and first month of the season. Oh yeah, and this stretch includes what is widely accepted as the greatest catch in football history. We've all seen this play 100 times before, but it's truly 1 in a million. 50 air yards while being dragged to the ground, Beckham gets 3 fingers on the ball and somehow hauls it in while staying in bounds. He did it on Sunday Night Football against the Cowboys in front of the whole nation. Every single kid on the playground tried making the Odell catch that Monday. I was a 13-year-old Giants fan watching this game with my dad. Baseball was and still is my favorite sport. Watching football was fine, but I only really watched the Giants to spend time with my dad and to have something to talk about at school the next day. This game single-handedly turned me from a casual NFL fan into a Giants diehard for life. The Giants didn't even win the game. They blew an 11-point halftime lead to drop to 3-8 on the year, and it simply didn't matter. OBJ made this team into must-see TV. This is obviously the greatest play of his career because it's the greatest catch of all time. But the people who say he's overrated based on one catch alone simply don't know what they're talking about. Let's look at some of the other catches from his rookie season. The previous week against the Niners, week 14 against the Titans, week 17 against the Eagles. Stepping back and looking at the stats, that Sunday night game against the Cowboys was only his 4th most yards in a game that year. It was one of 4 multi-touchdown games. Even in the context of his rookie year alone, removing the catch doesn't change how elite he was. If his foot landed out of bounds on that play, he'd still have put up one of the greatest rookie seasons ever and easily walked away with the Offensive Rookie of the Year award. Beckham now has the 7th most receiving yards as a rookie, trailing record holder Puka Nacua by 181. He played 5 fewer games, and let me reiterate for the 10th time, he missed all of preseason. Rookies aren't supposed to be able to do this with no reps. He averaged 108.8 yards per game, easily the most by any rookie ever. That's the 11th most in the Super Bowl era period. The guys above him on that list are all in the Hall of Fame, active players, or psychopaths. Randy Moss's historic 17 touchdown 1998 was probably considered the greatest rookie campaign before him, and Beckham put up just 7 fewer yards in 4 fewer games. No rookie has ever matched what Beckham did on a rate basis, and I don't think anyone ever will. Unfortunately for the Giants and for Odell's fans, this level of play only lasted for a few more seasons, and those seasons are the ones where he earned his diva reputation. He became the youngest cover athlete in Madden history in the summer entering his 2nd year, which was determined by a fan vote. In at least one way, Beckham was already the face of the league. Now, I'm not arguing that he was the best player or even the best receiver in the league, but culturally speaking, he was skyrocketing towards the top of that leaderboard. That summer, every teenage athlete had at least one teammate with his haircut. Every pickup football game had kids with tiny hands trying to catch the ball with 3 fingers. Every single deep ball animation in Madden was that 1 in a million catch for some reason. His pregame warm-up routine became an event of its own as sports consumption on social media took off. He had the beats on, he had the shorts on, he had his hair out, and he was making some of the most ridiculous casual one-handed catches you've ever seen, week after week. The idea of Odell had grown bigger than Odell himself, but through 7 weeks of 2015, the gaudy numbers from his rookie season just weren't present. He was averaging 77 yards per game, on pace for fewer yards than he had in his limited rookie campaign. Did the one catch elevate him into a conversation that he had no business being a part of? Some fans started throwing around the O word, but then he returned home. On November 1st, 2015, the Saints and the Giants played one of the greatest football games I've ever seen. Eli Manning and his top 2 targets were all born and raised in the Bayou. Beckham and Randall made their bones as LSU Tigers. They walked into the Mercedes-Benz Superdome and threw a Mardi Gras in November. Over 100 total points, over 1,000 total yards of offense, 855 combined passing yards, and a combined 13 passing touchdowns between the future Hall of Fame quarterbacks. Beckham scored twice from the goal line in the first half before catching a 50-yard bomb to tie up the game just after halftime. He caught 8 of 9 targets for 130 yards and 3 touchdowns. His only catch in the fourth quarter was a contested slant that he took 35 yards. Just take a look at the speed once he breaks free. His presence forced the already terrible Saints defense to put everything they had on him late in the game, letting Dwayne Harris run free for 2 touchdowns of his own. The Giants entered the fourth quarter trailing by 14 points. Just a few minutes later, they had the lead, but Drew Brees bounced back to tie things up with his 7th touchdown of the game. Then, in classic Giants fashion, the Saints walked them off. Even though the Giants lost, this game is a core sports memory of mine. This game kicked off a stretch of 6 consecutive 100-yard games for Beckham, 105 against Tampa, an 87-yard touchdown in a memorable showdown against the undefeated Patriots, which the Giants lost, of course. Then, against the division rival in Week 12, just like the previous year, Beckham made one of the most spectacular catches of the season. 149 yards and a touchdown against the Jets, 166 and 2 more scores against the Dolphins. Beckham could not be stopped. Despite the slowest start to the season, he was up to 1,300 yards and 12 touchdowns through 13 games. But the Giants' playoff hopes were hanging by a thread. They were 6-7, with 5 of their 7 losses coming on scores in the final 2 minutes of play. They were still in a 3-way tie for their division, but they matched up in Week 15 with the undefeated Super Cam Panthers, in a season full of memorable games for both the Giants and Beckham. This one takes the cake. This is probably the most well-known Odell game, the day he met his nemesis. Josh Norman was a 5th-round pick in 2012. He had to fight to stay on the roster each of his first 3 seasons with the Panthers. He emerged as a starting option at corner midway through 2014, keeping Julio Jones, Mike Evans, and Josh Gordon at bay. By 2015, he developed a reputation as one of the top shutdown corners in the league. He shadowed all the top receivers, including locking down Dez Bryant to a single 6-yard catch on Thanksgiving for his signature performance. Norman's emerging dominance was one of the top storylines of their defense, with Beckham averaging 130 yards in his last 6 games leading up to this matchup. The media billed it as a one-on-one heavyweight battle. Probably the first Panthers game all year where people weren't tuning in primarily to watch Cam Newton, and it lived up to the billing from the very first drive. Beckham broke free for a wide-open 50-yard touchdown, and he just dropped the ball. He doesn't drop this ball. Even though he beat Norman to get open, Norman was clearly in his head already. On the very next play, the game within the game truly began. Norman picked Beckham up and tossed him. Beckham blocked Norman in the back after a play. Odell slapped Norman across the face mask. No flags. Then, a second drop by Beckham. All eyes were on 13 and 24. I don't know if I've ever watched a game where I was so locked in on one corner wideout matchup. I was watching those two even on the running plays, in case anything crazy happened away from the ball. Norman completely shut Beckham out in the first half. No catches on 3 targets. Beckham generated 1 pass interference flag and got flagged himself for an unnecessary roughness. This guy was unstoppable for a month and a half before this, and Norman had him in hell. All the while, Cam repeatedly marched the Panthers down the field and established a 4-touchdown lead. Beckham finally made his first catch with 5 minutes left in the third quarter, to the sarcastic delight of the MetLife crowd. A few plays later, on a run play, Beckham sprinted full speed and dropped his helmet on Norman's head. This is easily the worst thing Odell ever did on the field. There is no way to spin this. He tried to take Norman's head off here. No intent besides trying to injure his opponent because he was frustrated. For a lot of people, I'm sure this moment put them off from ever rooting for this guy again, which is totally understandable. But somehow, Beckham wasn't ejected. He had 3 catches for 13 yards through 3 quarters. More flags thrown and penalty yards against him than catches and yards for him at this point in the game. It was a truly one-sided affair, and Beckham was exposed for the first time in his career. But then, the Giants started coming back. Even without much from their star receiver, just a few drives later, the Panthers' 4-score lead shrunk to 1. With under 3 minutes to go, Beckham made his mark in a positive way with a massive 40-yard catch and run. On 4th down in the red zone, under 2 minutes to play, Beckham finally beat Norman one-on-one to tie it up. In a game that started so ugly for him, Odell put on a show when it mattered most. For as good as he'd been, Norman wasn't the reason to watch this game. Neither was the future Hall of Famer Manning. The game featured the best linebacker I've ever seen in Luke Kuechly, and he wasn't the reason to watch either. MVP Cam Newton might have been the most electric player in football that year, but we weren't watching for him. We watched this game for Odell. This is one of the greatest games I've ever seen. And of course, the Giants went on to lose. Fun fact, from 2007 to 2015, the Giants played 3 undefeated teams in December. They lost all 3 of those games by the same exact score, 38-35. None of those 3 teams went on to win the Super Bowl, with 2 of them falling to the Giants in the playoffs. This game skyrocketed Norman's profile, despite allowing the final touchdown, and it forever changed Beckham's perception. He went from the fun-loving superstar into the ego-driven diva. The talent was undeniable, but now he was a villain. Beckham was suspended for the next week, and the Giants' loss officially ended their playoff hopes. It was their biggest loss of the season by far, and one of just 2 multi-score defeats that year. Tom Coughlin resigned after the season, with many speculating that his failure to control Beckham in the Panthers game was part of the reason why he was forced out. Man, this team would have been so much fun in the playoffs. Beckham ultimately finished his sophomore season with 1,400 yards and 13 touchdowns. He might not have been on Julio Jones's or Antonio Brown's level, but he was certainly close, and his antics and personality elevated him above those two to become the most popular player in the NFL. 2016 was the only season of Beckham's Giants tenure where the Giants were actually good. That being said, the offense took a step back and definitely became less aggressive, and it reflected in Beckham's numbers. His only 100-yard game in the first 5 weeks of the season came against Josh Norman, who joined the Redskins but never quite recaptured his 2015 dominance again. Despite Beckham's good performance, the Giants suffered a frustrating close defeat that culminated with Odell hitting a kicking net on the sideline, with the net hitting him back. When he finally scored his first touchdown of the year during Week 5, he made up with the net. The Giants were 2-3, once again losing close games, and the offense was struggling. Beckham was clearly getting frustrated with Manning's declining accuracy, frustrated with the decreasing number of targets, frustrated with the losing. Halfway through his Week 6 matchup against the Ravens, Beckham had 2 catches for 11 yards and a lost fumble. The Giants trailed and tempers were on the verge of flaring until the end of the 3rd quarter, when Beckham hauled in a 75-yard bomb from Manning to take the lead. Beckham caught another 43-yard pass down the sideline to set the Giants up for a field goal in the 4th, but they got the ball back trailing with 2 minutes left in the game. On 4th down, game on the line, Odell had his highlight of the season, taking a slant 66 yards to the house. And of course, he proposed to the kicking net on the sideline. God, I love this guy. Beckham put up 211 yards and 2 touchdowns in the second half alone, and the Giants finally won. The Herculean effort by the superstar receiver brought the G-Men back to 500, and they didn't look back. The Ravens game kicked off a 6-game win streak. The Giants defense emerged as an elite unit, generating takeaway after takeaway. They were winning games without Beckham needing to play Superman. In fact, 3 of his 400-yard games that year came in losses, even with the slightly decreased overall numbers. I think Beckham was happy to trade them away in favor of competitiveness. The Giants were going to the playoffs, and Beckham flew down to Miami to celebrate. The boat picture is easily Odell's most notorious off-the-field incident. Beckham and fellow receivers Victor Cruz, Sterling Shepard, and Roger Lewis posted up wearing Timbs on a boat in Miami with Trey Songz. You've all seen this already, but here's a quick rundown of the timeline. The Giants beat Washington on Sunday, January 1st. They had an off day Monday before prepping for their game in Green Bay the following weekend. To celebrate the new year, most of the Giants went out in the city on Sunday night. Being the star that he is, Beckham had access to a private jet, so he flew his receiver room down to Miami for a night out, planning to fly back in the early morning and rest up. But the plane had mechanical issues, so early Monday morning, the Giants went out on the boat, where the infamous photo was snapped. Nobody looks like they're even having a good time because none of them have slept. They fly back to New York that afternoon, go to sleep, and prepare for the playoff game starting on Tuesday. But it's not that simple. The picture spread like wildfire and immediately became the biggest storyline leading up to that playoff matchup. If they won, that photo would be revered. But of course, they lost. And it was an ugly loss. Manning had struggled with accuracy throughout most of the season. Even with the team-wide positives throughout the year, a lot of critics were questioning whether or not he still had it. But in classic Eli Manning fashion, he locked in and dropped dimes in the playoffs at Lambeau. The problem was that his receivers dropped his dimes. Beckham and Shepard each dropped very catchable touchdowns on their opening drive. The defense kept the lid on this game until the very last seconds of the first half. When Randall Cobb caught this Hail Mary, the Giants' season was all but over. Eli fucking Apple. The tone was set. The team came into the week unfocused, leaving points on the board on offense and making boneheaded mistakes on defense. Down 2 scores early in the fourth, 3rd and long, desperation time, Beckham had a wide open big play in his hands, and he dropped it yet again. Season over. If you look at Manning's stat line from this game, you'd assume that he struggled. But anyone who watched this game will tell you that he played one of the best games of his season and his receivers failed him. 5 drops from his receivers left over 50 yards and at least 1 touchdown on the board. Every Giant in this pick has expressed regret over that trip. Beckham later went on to say that the negative energy that this pick brought made losing feel inevitable.
But deep down inside, something had felt wrong. Like the attention had been shifted from, the New York Giants versus the Green Bay Packers to this boat story.
Eli tried his hardest to spin this into a non-story leading up to the game.
Obviously, they didn't pack accordingly. They didn't have any shirts, obviously, and kind of all long pants, no shorts, no flip-flops or anything. So just disappointed on their packing and not being prepared for that situation. I was telling people I was the one that took the picture. They wouldn't let me in with my shirt off, so they made me take it.
But when you lose like that, with open passes dropped by the unit that was caught out partying, you create an undying admonishment for what not to do before the playoffs. The vibes have not been right with this team since the boat pick. That stink is still here nearly a decade later. The Giants have the worst record in the league since then. They are about to hire their 5th head coach, and they're about to pick near the top of the draft yet again. After 2015, where nearly every close game went the other way, 2016 felt magical. The Giants were a legitimately great team. They were also very lucky and very healthy. That playoff loss was deflating, and the energy has remained in the building ever since. As for Beckham, he had one of the best 3-season runs to start a career ever. He played 43 games across those 3 years. No receiver has gone for as many yards across their first 43 NFL games. Only Randy Moss and Jerry Rice have caught more touchdowns. Beckham was literally one of one for the first 3 years of his career. He got hurt in the 2017 preseason, missed a week, did this stupid celebration during week 3, then broke his ankle during week 5. Beckham played 4 games, put up 300 yards, and the Giants went 3-13 in one of the most embarrassing and gut-wrenching seasons in team history. The Giants extended Beckham prior to the 2018 season, and he was excellent once again, both passing and receiving. Despite his excellence, the Giants started the year 1-7. Beckham caused more controversy by doing a near hour-long interview with Lil Wayne and Josiah Anderson in early October. In the interview, he questioned Eli's ability to evade pressure and find him deep. Beckham clamored for more energy from his teammates, better scheming from his coaches, and more targets. Say what you want about the New York media going after him unfairly, but this interview was like throwing a bucket of blood into a pool full of sharks. Tensions were rising. At the time of this interview, Beckham had only played in 8 games since the boat game in the last 2 seasons. The interview oozed with entitlement that he hadn't earned since that playoff disaster. He was becoming more of a distraction than his play was worth. He hurt his quad and missed the final 4 games of the year after Big Blue was eliminated. Nobody knew it yet, but Odell had played his last game as a Giant. Beckham joined the Browns in 2019, and just like that, his stardom began to fade. He went from the bright lights of New York to one of the few organizations worse than the Giants. In 2.5 years with his new team, he only surpassed 100 receiving yards twice, and he tore his ACL in October of 2020, missing the team's lone playoff run. The next season, Odell Beckham Sr. posted a compilation of Baker Mayfield missing his son on open pass attempts, which prompted Jr.'s release from the team. He finished his Browns career with 1,586 yards and 7 touchdowns, which looks like a single season's worth of stats from his prime. At this point in his career, Beckham was seen as an injury-prone distraction. Regardless, the red-hot LA Rams took a flyer on the falling star. Playing next to Cooper Kupp, Beckham didn't need to be who he once was. He played his role exquisitely, becoming one of Matt Stafford's go-to goal line targets. He scored 5 touchdowns in 8 regular season games, and he finally got a chance at playoff redemption. Beckham made an instant impact in the wildcard round against the Cardinals, catching a fade ball for a touchdown and completing a 40-yard pass of his own in the blowout victory. Stafford targeted Beckham 8 times in the divisional round against Tampa Bay, and Beckham hauled in 6 catches for 69 yards. In the NFC Championship game, Beckham went for his first 100-yard receiving game in 2.5 years. His 9 receptions were his most in a game since Week 3 of 2018. He was back. He was going to the Super Bowl, and he wasn't just along for the ride. He was a massive part of this playoff run, and he continued his storybook resurgence early in the Super Bowl, breaking the seal with a vintage touchdown catch in the first quarter.
Going to the end zone, reaching up and making the grab, Odell Beckham Jr.
That's some good eats.
Then he broke off a big gain on a 3rd and long early in the second quarter. That looks like Giants Odell. He had 2 catches for 52 yards and a touchdown, but as quickly as he reestablished himself as a star, he fell back down to earth in the worst way, tearing his same ACL yet again. Beckham went from the lowest of lows with Cleveland back to the highest of highs with LA before crashing back down to earth with this injury, all within a few short months. The Rams went on to win the Super Bowl, and Odell got his ring, but he went from the biggest story on this team to an afterthought, all because of that injury. Beckham's time with the Rams is emblematic of his career as a whole. He flashed excellence on the biggest of stages, but that excellence was short-lived. If he doesn't tear his ACL in this game, he probably wins Super Bowl MVP and signs a massive contract that offseason. If he retires after this Super Bowl, we probably remember him more fondly. He spent a few mediocre seasons with the Ravens and Dolphins, then basically begged for a job all throughout this past preseason before being popped for PEDs. Now he's 33 years old. He can't play at a high level anymore. The memories of his negative antics are returning to the forefront of the conversation around his legacy, as is the general feeling that he left us wanting to see more from his unbelievable talent. I don't think that's fair. He was so good early in his career that we wanted more. He's such a big and enigmatic personality that we wanted him to be good for longer. This is the NFL. Injuries happen all the time. Guys lose their ability overnight. It happens, and Beckham's not at fault for it happening to him. The goal of this video was to contextualize just how elite he was at his peak without washing out any of his shortcomings. Even if you're not a fan of Odell Beckham Jr. the person, I hope you come away with a newfound appreciation for Odell Beckham Jr. the player. Thanks so much for watching.